Welcome back to the Wizards of Amazon podcast, your weekly blueprint for explosive success. I'm Carlos Alvarez, full-time successful Amazon seller and organizer of the largest Amazon seller meetup group in the world. Let's do this. Welcome to the Wizards of Amazon podcast, where we cover all things private label. My name is Carlos Alvarez, and I will be your host for the show. On today's show, we have an amazing guest, Kevin Flaherty of Thrasio or Thras.io. What's up, Kevin?
Oh, just happy to be here, Carlos. I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, man. Well, we've connected, I believe, on LinkedIn initially. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's correct.
And we immediately put something on the books, and you presented to our advanced Amazon seller meetup group. So everyone verified in excess of 100,000. Everyone loved the presentation as well. So I do appreciate that and hope to have you back.
Yeah, of course.
I want to say, tell us about Thrasio, which we're going to get to that. But I feel like at this point, every Amazon seller has either knows about you or knows about Thrasio, or hopes that they get their business to a certain stage where they can have that amazing conversation with Thrasio. So for my guests that were not part of that advanced meetup event or have lived under a rock and don't know what Thrasio is to date, do you mind doing introducing yourself to everybody listening and introduce Thrasio?
Yeah, of course. So to kick it off with Thrasio, we started in September of 2018. Our two co-CEOs, Josh and Carlos, Carlos was in the operations space, so he's run and operated his own businesses, both private and public, and Josh was in the private equity and venture capital space. They had come across the Amazon platform, not yet in the FBA space, but had come across Amazon through Viral Launch. So they were invested in, which I'm sure a lot of your sellers are familiar with, Viral Launch. They were invested in that business, had come across the FBA platform, and really saw it to be an incredible tool for entrepreneurship, just because I'm sure a lot of your listeners know there is such a low barrier to entry to starting your own business. And they really saw it as a once-in-a-generation opportunity for wealth building. They also saw it as a space that was ripe for consolidation. So fast forward 2 years from September of 2018 to today, we've grown from our two co-CEOs who just had an idea to over 300 full-time employees. When offices existed, we were located in Boston, New York, and Houston, Texas, with a few satellite offices across the pond in the UK and in Lisbon.
When offices existed?
Yeah.
I love it. We're there.
Yep.
Go for it. Sorry about that.
So we've been able to raise over $500 million of growth capital, while most importantly, remaining profitable. So, we've used that capital to build out what we call our spheres of excellence, meaning we built out a world-class supply chain management team, brand management team, search engine optimization team. I had mentioned before that, we had exposure to Viral Launch. The co-founder, Casey Goss, actually left Viral Launch and joined us a few months back. So every ASIN that comes under the Thrasio umbrella is analyzed by his team. We've also built out, a Walmart marketplace team, an eBay marketplace team, a D2C team for Shopify accounts, et cetera, as well as brick and mortar retail team. So we sort of think of ourselves as the next generation CPG company, where the Procter & Gamble's of the past needed to really own their own manufacturing vertical. They were, using a pray and spray sort of mentality when it came to advertising, and they needed to have a stranglehold on their own retail distribution. Now, you, and I'm sure all your listeners know, with e-commerce, that model has really been flipped on its head. Small businesses can have really nimble supply chains. We can target our ads and we can sell direct to consumer. And so what we're doing in sort of the 3 to 5 year outlook of Thrasio is to really use our Amazon acquisitions, which we're always going to be a part of, use them as the research and development arm of Thrasio, and build them across the e-commerce platform, because we do really feel like it's in the second or third inning of this game and we're just getting started. So that's a quick overview of Thrasio.
That's awesome. And I have a bunch of questions just in that. How about yourself and how you, like pre Thrasio, what you specifically do at Thrasio?
Yeah, of course. So I started in the private equity and venture capital space. We were working both on my end. I was out working for Advantage Capital, which was utilizing private equity and venture capital for smaller businesses in underserved areas of the capital markets. So I was working to go out and source and structure those sorts of deals. And we were also working on the public policy side of things to really drive economic development programs to these sorts of states and on the federal level as well. Came across Thrasio, and now I'm on our acquisitions team working with Ken Kubek and Gwen Sylvester, who are chatting with, sellers like yourselves and your community, really educating them about sort of their exit opportunities once they hit sort of a certain threshold level. And what I'm doing is, chatting with sellers, structuring and negotiating deals, and evaluating them on the upfront side with research and development and sort of the competitive landscape.
So you're in the exciting part of it. Like you're actually with the other sellers that are soon going to be part of the Thrasio fan.
Yep. So it's a fun place to be, especially if you're a people person and you like to chat with sellers and entrepreneurs, because it really is just a different breed. So we always love chatting with entrepreneurs.
Awesome. You mentioned that, and I don't think I caught this the last time when you presented the advanced event was, and it makes sense, but your Thrasio acquires businesses that are Amazon businesses. And the main goal, I mean, obviously profitability is important, but you mentioned almost use them as research. Is that what you said? Like to then branch out through all the other channels, I guess Walmart, Overstock, eBay, like anything else out there. So does that mean that a brand that is already in all of those other channels may be less attractive?
So that's a great question. And the question or the answer is at its face value, no. So where our strike zone acquisition would be a business with 80% plus of revenue stemming from Amazon. And the idea is that, we've become maniacally focused on these Amazon sorts of businesses, and we know the space incredibly well. Now, we also are expanding outwards into these different sorts of platforms, and we're seeing growth at an exponential rate through the Amazon platform, but we also see these other sorts of platforms outside of Amazon as being an excellent way to grow brand recognition. And so, to your original question of if they're already on those sorts of platforms, it doesn't become less attractive. What would probably be less attractive is a business that has, 60% or more of revenues stemming outside of Amazon. Just because from our standpoint, we still are maniacally focused on the Amazon ecosystem and, focusing on businesses that, have that Amazon-centric revenue stream.
And for clarity's sake, you're not partnering with businesses. You're Thrasio's buying them.
Correct. So 100% of either assets, if you're a US-based company, or shares of the business, if you're a UK-based entity, are purchased by Thrasio. There's no obligation for sellers to stay on with the business and continue to operate, which ends up being a really sort of differentiator, I think, within the market, where a lot of different buyers would like a seller to stay on for 6 months to a year, or even sometimes as little as 3 months, but 3 months nonetheless that you can't spend more time with family or starting your next venture or what have you. For us, I mean, we have 300 full-time employees who are fully working towards the goal of optimizing these sorts of Amazon-type businesses.
That's a huge plus. Every business I've exited, I was as part of the deal, it was 6 months to a year.
Yep.
In reality, if it was 6 months, it was really closer to a year, and if it was a year, it was closer to 18 months.
Yep.
And it doesn't seem like that big of a deal before you do it, but there's like this switch that turns, like whatever was fueling you to do what you were doing is no longer fueling you.
Right.
So it's pretty bad.
Well, that becomes sort of the interesting thing, particularly as you sort to move up the chain in terms of size, where private equity funds might go lower middle market and sort of dip into the space where an Amazon business might be doing 5 million plus of EBITDA or seller discretionary earnings, whatever you want to call it. There might be some interest from private equity funds, and what typically they pitch is they'll purchase 80% of the business. The operators will stay on for a year or two, and they'll roll 20% of their equity. So now the operator who once was holding 100% of the equity has to stay on and operate for another year or two, and they're only working for that incremental 20% ownership that they now have. Whereas for us, it's, hey, look, we're going to purchase 100% of the business. You don't need to continue to operate. And we also have an earnout component, which allows sellers to participate in sort of the upside that we're able to drive with no risk to them. So, it allows for them to take the capital that they've gained from the purchase of the business, if they'd like to, roll it into starting another brand, and then start that whole process again of just, building the next brand that they can sell. So it becomes a nice little mushroom effect.
Unpack that a little bit, because what I understood is that I sell, like, let's say, wine aerators, right? So I sell my wine accessories brand to you, and some of that monies that you've paid me from that sale, I then start another brand.
Yeah.
How is it? I mean, obviously now I have your phone number and I'd be like, hey, I got this other brand, but how is it? How does that tie in?
Yeah. So sort of to take one step back, it probably makes sense to talk about what we see within the market and typically how we see different sorts of deal structures when thinking about sort of a purchase. Our typical deal structure comes with 4 components. First component is straightforward, guaranteed payment due on day of close. Second tranche of payment is what we call a stability payment. That's saying, hey, look, Carlos, we know the craziness that can, happen with these sorts of Amazon businesses, and whether that be black hat tactics, fake 5-star reviews, free giveaways, all that fun stuff. Just to get a stamp of confidence from the seller to say, hey, look, the business isn't built on a house of cards. We defer a small tranche of the purchase price for 12 months. And the seller would be due that purchase price or that small tranche of payment 12 months post-acquisition, just as long as revenues remain flat. On average, Thrasio has been able to grow top-line revenue around 233%, 12 months post-acquisition. So we've had an excellent track record of being able to pay out all of our stability payments to date. So we really just view that as an insurance policy. And then the third component is an earnout component, which we find most sellers like the most. And it's saying, hey, look, Carlos, we like your brand, we like your business. We think that there's upside here. And, we also are assuming that you think that there's upside here as well. And although we're purchasing 100% of the assets of the business and there's no obligation you would need to continue on, we do want to still allow you to participate in that upside. So typically the way that that's, structured is the seller would be due 50% of any incremental profits that we're able to generate for up to 2 years. So let's say you made $1 million of seller discretionary earnings in the last 12 months. We purchase the business today. 12 months from now, let's say we grow the seller discretionary earnings to another $2 million. You had basically nothing to do with it. You didn't participate in any of the operations or anything along those lines. 12 months from today, you would be due an additional $500,000 just because, that's 50% of that incremental $1 million value growth. That it's a pretty nice way to do it. Right. And so that sort of gets back to my point of, hey, look, you can take that upfront guaranteed purchase price, which you get 45 days after you sign a term sheet. you can go take that, reinvest it into another brand, and start the whole process again of growing brands and sort of mushrooming your business.
Wow, I had no idea of that last one. That's that's really good.
Yeah.
I don't know. That sounds like a topic in and of itself. I started rabbit holing on all that stuff. It's super cool. The something I wanted to discuss with you, I feel like you're uniquely qualified to discuss, is there's a lot of talk as to what makes a business more attractive and will earn a bigger multiplier when being sold.
Yep.
Some of them are just insane. Like, you just know, like, that's not true. And other ones have been said for so long, and I just don't know the veracity of them, honestly. Like for example, let's say you're buying a brand, and let's go with wine accessories again. You're going to buy a brand, my brand of wine accessories, but my Amazon seller account is ungated for some difficult, unrelated stuff like Nike and Reebok and these other things that would be a gold mine for an arbitrage seller, right, or wholesaler to be able to do that. Does you buying my seller account and my wine accessory brand, does that category ungating affect anything with the multiplier?
No, and sort of the reason why is we think of it as purchasing the private label brand, right? And, we're not in the wholesale game or the arbitrage game, but we're solely focused on purchasing private label businesses. So we do hear that a lot. That doesn't have much, if any, sort of impact on valuation. We also hear different folks saying, hey, look, we're grown and sort of launched 100 new products in the last 6 months. And,
right,
we have 1,500 SKUs. And it's like, well, that's great. But sort of in our particular situation, we're managing over, at this point, 6,000 ASINs. And for us, what becomes more attractive is sort of a higher revenue with lower product count. Just because it sort of makes sense if you think about it. Operational efficiencies of purchasing a business that has one hero product doing $10 million of revenue versus purchasing a business doing $10 million of revenue and 1,500 SKUs or 150 products, then sort of we'd rather take the one with the one hero SKU. So we always sort of recommend, hey, focus on lower SKU count and driving higher revenue.
Next time I get the itch to sell something, I'm definitely going to you guys. That's pretty much what my style of private label branding and selling looks like. Is I stay very lean, shockingly lean to some people on the amount of ASINs that I have. They just have they do really well in sales. So that whole inch wide, mile deep is just my approach to it. I would rather mop floors at Starbucks personally than do that whole mile wide, inch deep approach and just have all this it would just drive me nuts.
Yep. We're with you on that one. So
yeah. What about social media? That's the other one. I have a really strong social media. I have a great Instagram. Like, what's the skinny on that?
Yeah, it's a nice to have, but it's not going to bump up sort of the valuation by much, quite frankly. Sort of what becomes attractive, we think, in the marketplace becomes size and sort of product count, but also sort of ranking and defensibility of your products, and also market category and sort of how large that is. And from our perspective, we love when there's, well-established social media accounts, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. We have entire teams that will keep those up. And if the brand doesn't have one, we end up building one ourselves. So, it's a nice to have, but I don't think it would drive meaningful value from a multiple sort of perspective. And I would sort of guide sellers more to focusing on driving sales and profitability in terms of a multiplier than, focusing their time and energy and capital on, social media.
Okay. So to be clear though, you're not saying social media is not important. You're saying that in regards to increasing your multiplier in the sale, it's not as important as the
Correct.
other things you mentioned.
Yep. That's fair to say.
Email list.
Email list. Yeah. I mean, again, from our perspective, it's a nice to have, but it gets, tough, right? Because you could have, how well maintained is that email list and things along those lines. You could have 20,000 emails, but if, 90% of them are kind of junky, it's not that valuable. And so it becomes sort of more difficult as you take you're looking at a business at face value. Again, we sort of chalk that up as a nice to have, but wouldn't sort of drive meaningful multiplier value there.
Well, what are some other, just a few other maybe things that brands you're speaking to feel is super important that you should know because they feel like it'll drive up their multiplier, but then in reality, you're like, no, I mean, like it's in the similar vein of what we just talked about with email and social media. Like, yeah, it's good, it's nice, but it's not really going to add a value to your multiplier.
Yep. Honestly, those end up being the big ones is sort of social media accounts. A lot of times sort of Shopify, they're great. It's fine. But a lot of times we get sort of the commentary, well, we're actually not an Amazon brand. We sell 10% on Shopify. So we're more of a D2C brand versus sort of an Amazon business. And okay, sort of the way that we think about that is more of, okay, well, the Shopify sales channel allows you sort of a way to liquidate if something goes sideways with Amazon, but it's probably not going to save your business if it's 10% of your business, right? So we're not going to place a higher multiple on that D2C sales channel if it's sort of that nominal 10%. Whereas a lot of times we'll hear sellers who want a multiple based on their Amazon business and a multiple based on their Shopify accounts. And it's like, well, it doesn't really.
Right.
It's not. It's apples to oranges here. And at the heart of it, you are an Amazon business.
Right. So the external website, if it's too much of sales, then it makes it unattractive because it's not a 60 to 80% Amazon business.
Correct.
And then, oh wow! See, that's. I just learned something there. I would have really believed that an external website that had some nice traffic going through it would have made it more attractive, even for the ability to drive traffic to Amazon. So
yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where it could be attractive to certain buyers for sure. Just for sort of the model that we fit into, we're sort of maniacally focused on those businesses that are more Amazon centric and sort of having a placing sort of more of a value on that than split between D2C and Amazon. And that could change over time, right? But at the moment, that's sort of the way that we're thinking about it.
All right. Okay. Anything else? And we'll switch gears into I guess maybe the more positive, not the things that don't, and maybe the things that do. But can you think of any other popular? We covered, categories or brands the Seller Central's ungated for, external websites, social media, email list.
I would say those are definitely the biggest ones.
All right.
The ones that we hear most often.
Well, let's. How about this? I don't know how to word this, but let's say, is there a more attractive to you guys between I ranked based off of, or I'm assuming how a person got to a certain rank is important because as you mentioned, there's black hat tactics and there's all that. So and you have Casey and a few other names that you dropped over there that to the trained eye, that's easy to see what's going on. Now, a person that ranks based on Facebook ads to a website, to their site, or really robust Amazon ads versus add to cart rebates, giveaways, like kind of like manipulating that side of things. Is there one more valuable than the other?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, particularly going through the sales process, and particularly once you hit a certain scale, sort of, we all know that there's sort of these gray hat tactics going on, and as long as sellers are more upfront about what's going on, and we're going to find what they're doing either way. In terms of ranking, I wouldn't say that there's one that's more valuable than the other per se. Obviously organically ranking becomes sort of the end all be all, right? But other than that, it's really just sort of getting into the weeds and having a more better understanding on a deal by deal basis of how products typically will rank within that particular category, and where those products that we're looking at, how they rank based on that.
If you're able to share this, I don't know if you are, but so I'm trying to learn this here myself with you on how this. So if both are kind of equal, yep. Like one person that ranked off of 100% rebates and giveaways, making Amazon think they were full price sales and whatever, and they rebated on the back end, versus someone who did it organically and they're in the same position. Let's say they're equal and they're stabilized as far as sales each day. With one brand, it seems like there's no approach to rank the next product short of more rebates and more giveaways and stuff like that, versus the other one, they really have a system to do it. So would that be an approach that Thrasio would be open? Because you mentioned you're going to expand on Amazon, maybe 200%. You're going to go to all these other channels. So as far as the ranking method for Thrasio on the back end, would you just mimic what the brand already did?
No. So, we have a 507 point checklist that every ASIN goes.
Said 507?
Yeah, very specific. It's sort of this proprietary list that every ASIN that goes under the Thrasio umbrella will undergo during that diligence process, so that they get sort of the Thrasio treatment, so to speak, right? Where we know how we're operating, we know what works, we know what doesn't, and we have our own way of doing things. And so, we're always happy to get feedback from the seller as to what they're doing. We generally have a pretty good idea of what's going on there anyway, but sort of to be able to take it to the next level is, why businesses are typically selling to us, right? Because they understand, hey, whether it's because of time, capital, interest, or skill set, they can't take the business from 1 million in sales to 5 million or 20 million to 50, whereas we have that sort of institutional know-how and institutional resources to really be able to take it to that next level. So I think that's really why sellers sell to us, is, selling for our knowledge, and they want to see their brand and their products in more people's hands. And so from our standpoint, we definitely take into account what was going on prior, but we also have our own proprietary way of operating post-acquisition.
507. You lost me at 507, man, but it's all good. How about, are you able to, like in 2 or 3 points, if you would, what would be the most important things to look at when you're evaluating a business from the seller side to get the best multiple?
Yep. Number one is size. A business that's doing
size matters.
Size matters.
All right.
A business doing, $5 million of EBITDA is going to sell for a different multiple than a business doing, $500,000 of EBITDA. It's just sort of the way of the world. I would also say sort of category. So the larger the category in the space, then, the more opportunity there is for.
Can you give me an example there with category?
Yeah. So, we typically use the example of a spatula. It's in the home and kitchen category. It might be the number one ranking within that entire category. And there's not much innovation that's going to go on with a spatula. It kind of is what it is. So sort of having a ratings, sort of solid ratings, and a review moat compared to its competitors. So that's sort of what we think about within sort of where it ranks in the category.
Okay.
And then lastly, so we did size, we did category, and then the other is just sort of product count. And sort of the lower the product count, the higher the revenue.
The lower, the better. Yes. Finally, I have been validated. No. I don't get it. It's like apparently, I guess it could go good the other way, but it's almost like something that's preached. It's like, look, to be successful and have your best chance of making more money and being attractive for an exit is to just constantly launch new products. I feel it's faulty logic, and it looks like we may agree on that, but where do you think that stems from? Like, why would somebody say that?
You sort of have to look at who's saying it or why they might be saying it, right? If you're trying to, within the community, if you're trying to educate people on how to launch products and how to be successful on Amazon, then sort of the logic would be, okay, well, you need to launch as many products as you can, and you need to take as many sort of classes as you might need to continue to launch. And what's the new and innovative way to launch these products? And so I think a lot of it stems from sort of that hype within the community of take these classes, you'll be a millionaire by tomorrow, and you just need to launch 15,000 products and you'll be good. Right. So
at under $1,000, that's all you need to start.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that stems a lot from it. And then also, quite frankly, we're in the position where, like I said before, we're managing over 6,000 ASINs. So we're in the position where, one ASIN doing $1 million or $10 million in revenue doesn't scare us. Whereas smaller players might want more diversification within their products. Right. And so whether that's smaller institutional players that we might be competing with on deals, or whether that's individual buyers who might be using an SBA loan to finance the transaction, they might just get spooked by that sort of higher concentration of revenue for that one product. Whereas, for us, if that one product gets suspended or, is shut down for a few days, it's not meaningfully going to affect the Thrasio company as a whole. Whereas if it's one buyer or a smaller player, it could meaningfully derail sort of that business.
So let me ask you one more thing here. I'm loving this conversation. So one of the brands I sold in the past, it was weird too. Like the person, I get approached to sell it, and up until that point, I had really imagined like this is the business my great grandkids were going to be working in. It was going to be the family business. And I had no intentions of like, as a matter of fact, like, would you sell it? No, I wouldn't sell my business like immediately. But once the person came and they talked about numbers and things, automatically my mind went to, well, there are these other cool things that I can't do right now because I'm here and I would be able to do. So I wind up doing it. And through the process, I was just like, I'm barely going to get anything. I got to be small potatoes to this person because I didn't know how to evaluate, like, say, the Thrasio that would be trying to buy my business. Like, what is small or big to them? And come to find out, I was one of the biggest because they were small, but I was one of the biggest. I'm wondering that I'm too small for them, but I was one of the biggest purchases that they had made.
Yep.
As a single purchase, which was just blew me out of the water. So steering it back to you guys, to Thrasio, what is, if somebody does feel like I'm too small to, like maybe they have a fewer ASINs, high amount of sales, good profit, and they fit what you've said. What's that small? What is too small to reach out?
Yeah, so I should first just say that we're always happy to talk to all sellers, whatever sort of range that they might fit in. No one's really too small for a conversation, because down the road you guys could reach that sort of threshold level that we're typically looking for, and we always love establishing relationships within the community and being helpful where we can. So that's first and foremost. In terms of what we typically look at in terms of size range of a deal, on the lower end, we'd probably say $1 million of trailing 12-month revenue is sort of our lower threshold, all the way up to sort of the higher end threshold being $75 million to $100 million of what we've looked at. And so, we have capabilities and an excellent track record of being able to not only acquire those sorts of businesses, which not every buyer can do, but also sort of operating and growing those businesses in those sorts of different life cycles. And so that's sort of the range. It's a large range for sure, $1 million to $100 million, but that's where we will comfortably fall into.
Perfectly answered, man. Kevin, I want to be respectful of your time. I'm positive I'm going to have you back on the show and hopefully impose on your time more to have you and maybe everyone else from Thrasio to do some presentations to my group. I'm also definitely going to be reaching out now that I know Casey's there. Casey's been on my list of Casey Goss of, I want to meet this person. I'd love to have them on the show. So now that I have a connection, I'm gonna be on you about an intro.
Absolutely.
But, yeah. I'd love to have Casey on, especially to hear like what he's doing at Thrasio. To be respectful of your time, how can people reach out to you about their business or anything we spoke about here?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach out directly to me. It's kevin.flaherty, FLAHERTY at thrash.io. So that's my direct email. You can also reach out directly on our website contact form, where it will ask, size range of the business, whether or not you're interested in chatting with the team. And that can just be a very informal conversation just to introduce ourselves. So either directly to me via my email or via the website contact, and we can get you lined up with someone to chat with.
Awesome. I'll definitely link to both the contact form from the website and your email. I'll put it in the show notes of this episode to make it easy for other people to find it in case they're driving and couldn't write that down and don't want to scrub back. But before letting you go, question I love to ask all my guests. I'm a voracious book reader. We have the Entrepreneurs Book Club on Facebook, where we read one entrepreneurial book a month, and then discuss it on Zoom at the end of the month. But this does not have to be entrepreneurial. But what is your favorite book you've ever read and why?
So I would probably say favorite book of all time is a novel, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger.
Amazing book.
Yep. But sort of what I'm reading now, and it's been super interesting, has been the book called You Don't Own Me, which is about the lawsuit dispute between Mattel and I believe it's MGA regarding Barbie and the Bratz dolls, and sort of the discrepancy of who owns intellectual property at a given time, which I think can also be pretty applicable to Amazon sellers as well.
I'm going to order that book right after we stop recording. You said it was You Don't Own Me by, do you know the author?
Oh, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I can get it to you.
No, it's all good. I'll go to Amazon. Go to Amazon and help boost somebody's business and maybe make them more attractive for Thrasio.
Nice.
Yeah.
A question for you is yourself, favorite book you've ever read and anything that you're reading right now that you would recommend?
Favorite book I've ever read is, I'm going to say it's mostly because of how impactful it was on me, period, and what was going on in my life. And that had to do with The Founder's Dilemma by Noah Wasserman.
Yep.
Only because everything they said, the warnings they gave, everything you shouldn't do, by that point, I have been embroiled in so many lawsuits and had so many businesses implode on me because I had done everything wrong. And it was hard. It was like, it hit me hard, and it allowed me at that point to then go for every new business that I opened and say, okay, this is a red flag here. Like, before you do business with this person, this is really how this should be structured, to maintain a friendship, to maintain boundaries and healthy relationships. So, Founder's Dilemma by Noah Wasserman. Right now, I'm actually reading a book that was recommended to me by a guest on this show called Blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman. I'm loving it. I definitely think it's going to be a book that I'll recommend to a lot of other people.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much for your time again. And you've been amazing. I love the conversation, and have an awesome day.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Carlos. You too.
All right. We'll be back next
Like
week.
what you heard and want to stay connected? Join our Facebook group or find me anywhere on social media at Wizards of Amazon, or text the word Amazon to 69922.